like Russ, 124 million people watching, takes him down, throws the pick at the 1 yard line. That's real. He owns it. That's true. You know, and at that moment, he went back and he watched the film, and for 10 days he was in pain, didn't sleep for 6 days. On the 10th day, he texts me, need to have the best off season ever. Time to hit the reset button.
Wow. Yes. Yep. Yeah. So you were up there. You went back and forth, or did you spend a lot of time?
You know, Michael's one of my closer friends. When Michael was finishing his career, Tom Condon said, "Hey, you want to come to Bradenton?" And you guys go ahead and start. But when Michael Johnson was finishing his career, you know, this was kind of the early origins of combine training.
Yeah.
You know, I just made my second year at IMG Academy, and Mike had just won his 5th gold in Sydney.
Right.
And so he, you know, his agent and was an IMG guy, and Tom, and they ran into each other, and he said, you know, could you help guys run the 40? This was, I think, 2000. And, you know, he said, yeah, you know, a lot of 40s, speed is what it is. You got what it is, but technique can start, and you can do this. And so would have been LaDainian Tomlinson's pre-draft class with Hutchinson, Winky, Freddie Mitchell.
Oh, yeah.
Tay Cody, Tommy Pauly, Will Allen, a lot of those guys. Michael came out for like 3 days, and he did all the stuff physically, like showing guys. But, you know, Chad, who the Yankees and Dallas Cowboys, or the mental coach, and I were kind of ran the department there, making like 26 grand. I took a pay cut from school teaching to go up and be, you know, one of the mental coaches in Bradenton. And we asked, you know, Mike if he could just spend an hour just explaining how he was number 1 in the world for 11 years, which is like not easy to do. So when he talked for the first hour, like the one thing you could figure out is this guy could run Microsoft. You know, this guy could run any organization. I mean, his knowledge of how to be a really good and exceptional track and field athlete, his body, his physiology, his mind, his approach was incredible. So he was transitioning out of track and field at the time. And so Chad and I both built a good relationship with him. He went up to Seattle. My dad was, you know, a motivational speaker, writer, all that stuff. Spent a couple of days with my dad, and then, you know, told me, he said, I want to win gold medals. You know, I'm 34, retired. I want to win gold medals in the next 34, 50 years of my life.
Yeah.
So, you know, so we just, you know, got a chance to spend a lot of time with him as he was forming Michael Johnson Performance, as he was forming all the things. But he was really, for me, probably, I had met, you know, Rafter and some of the different guys before, but Michael was the first one where I really understood, you know, how powerful it could be as an athlete if you not only knew what to do to be good, but you knew how to do that daily.
Yeah.
And, you know, we would call it like conscious competence. You know, and you know that you know.
Right.
And so every athlete, man, when I was young, like the Freddie Adu's and all those, I would call Mike and I would just bounce things off him. And he came to Bradenton often to run the program and spend time, and had a girlfriend that spent a lot of time along Boat Key at the time. So he was a huge part of my life, one of my best friends. And so I would go to McKinney when he opened the facility probably 10 times, 10, 15 days a year to help out with track athletes. And from a sports psychology perspective, you know, the way I approached it was a lot different than the U.S. Olympic Committee. You know, I was more from the coaching world, the background. I'd started with the Jaguars in 2002. So, you know, I'd kind of been beaten down. So I kind of knew what worked and what didn't work, and was pretty practical. So anyways, I remember meeting you, and he had a lot of great athletes that would come in and out of there.
Yes, you did. Yes.
So, but anyways, you know, really excited to be here with Ben, Tyler, and Darren.
Yeah, man. We appreciate you, man. I'm
impressed you remember our names, because names are one of the hardest. That's one of the hardest things for me, is to remember names.
He knew that you played 8-man football at Abilene.
8-man football.
It wasn't hard how you just label that. I'm just saying, he knew. I mean, listen, we're talking to Trevor Moawad, mental conditioning expert, and listen, I want to go and talk this through, because Trevor, when I played, we didn't have the resources available. I played from 1992 through 2004. I couldn't imagine having the strength, the mental strength, to be able to talk to someone, actually be able to talk to someone who can provide me the mental strength and the mental conditioning to lift my game to the next high. Because it was always, in my mind, it was always just work harder.
Yeah.
Get in the weight room.
Yep.
Listen, you made a mistake. Go harder, not look at it from a different perspective. So today, and listen, our listeners that are out there right now probably know about you a lot, but I want to go back a little bit further and talk about your journey and what led you to this point in your life. Yeah.
Well, again, first of all, great to join you guys. It's a really, Darren, I think in you, Ben, or Tyler's experience, you're not alone, because I remember when I started, and I'll get to the evolution, but when I started at IMG Academy in 2000, sports psychology, the psychological architecture, developing the mind, was the future of sports. They're starting to write some articles. You just had that big wave starting with Mark Verstegen, and sort of the change in training, where training was sort of leaving bigger, faster, stronger, grip it, rip it, only Olympic lifting, and transitioning to functional training. Football players training like football players, girls soccer players training like girls soccer players. You started to have that segmentation. But 20 years later, sports psychology is still the future of sports, which means it never had a present.
20 years later, still the future.
Yeah.
I think if you look at the vast majority, I think maybe 3 or 4 college programs are using it actively the way, Coach Saban did and does. The NFL, obviously it's part of the draft process. They'll have a guy in EAP. Sometimes they'll have, whatever you call it, mental skills. But if you don't position it the right way, it's tough to get started. And there's so many stereotypes and so many things from that perspective. But let me give you a little bit of my evolution. I grew up in the mid-'70s, and I was born in the mid-'70s. My dad had been a high school teacher and a coach in Washington State. He, after 12 years, he'd won a state championship. Post-mortem, went in the Hall of Fame in the state. So, I was my family my mom taught special education, and my dad was a high school basketball coach, English teacher, and then also taught these things called pep talks, personal enrichment principles. And in the mid-'70s, so right when I was born, about 4 high school coaches got together that were all state championship football, baseball, and basketball coaches. And they'd had so much interest from these things they were doing with their teams on the power of the mind and setting goals and putting a plan together and learning how to minimize negativity and just adding that layer to their programs. They'd started working with junior colleges to get continuing education credits. They just basically got together and formed a company called the Pacific Institute. The business world was really fascinated. Seattle has a great business community, Boeing, McDonnell Douglas, a lot of those places. And these coaches that had master's degrees in physical education, built this first company called the Pacific Institute. And the business world at the time, Darren, an 8.5-hour workday, even by the mid to late 70s, you were getting 4 hours of employee productivity per day. And if the employee was going through divorce or emotional distress, it was 1.5 out of 8.5 hours a day. You had a level of efficiency from an employee. Right. So that was a real problem for the business community. So they looked to these guys to develop systems, and they developed like manuals, and then they could train people to teach them. Went on to be a good business. My dad in the early 80s left that. He would work in sports. My dad worked with Coach Tarkanian back when they had Reggie.
Shark.
They had Reggie Theus and those guys, John McLeod and the Phoenix Suns in the 80s, and then Bernie Bickerstaff and Sonics. But there was no money in that. Like if Coach Bickerstaff goes to Wally Walker, who was running the Sonics at the time, and says, hey, I want to bring in this program. It's going to work on our mindset, our mentality, our approach, how we manage success, how we deal with adversity. Excuse my language. Wally's like, what the fuck is your job? Like,
right.
That's how we pay you.
Right.
So there wasn't a place for it. So my dad did most of that, and then with Steve Lavin at UCLA for fun.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of high school programs, a lot of high school coaches. Actually, Mercer Island, a great basketball program, they're one of their the head coach of Point Loma Nazarene, which kind of like Abilene Christian.
Yes, sir. Say it again.
I'm gonna jump on and talk to his team today, because my dad used to spend time with his grandpa's team, which is crazy. So I was raised in that environment. It was a really interesting way to grow up. My dad was a big believer in the minimization of negativity. We weren't allowed to watch the news at home outside of the weather or sports. No country music.
What? Wow.
Yeah. Or rhythm and blues. I had, my dad traveled 250 days a year. So they would play audio tapes a night of like Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy, my dad.
Yeah.
They did a lot of target campaigning and affirmations with me, which were not like outcome based, but I take setbacks as temporary and I bounce back quickly. All these little young statements kind of.
So they were using you. I mean, they used you. Were you like someone that your father used as far as?
He was built in a lab.
Yeah, he was.
I think
you were the guinea pig.
Yeah, I think my mom said that, because I'm 7 years younger than my older brother. So he and my dad was full time in this new world. I never grew up with him as a coach or a teacher, although I think what this is similar to teaching.
Yeah. So
it was an interesting way to grow up. But, I went to and my dad was first generation. His family immigrated or came originally from Lebanon. So he was kind of, as he moved into this new field, was the first time kind of started to make money. And, like a third home, I was able to go to private school and all that stuff. But it was an interesting way to grow up. But I was really skeptical. And I think that that's important for me. And I think why I've kind of found a place in this industry, because the positive thinking idea never really resonated with me. The idea of like, something goes wrong, just be positive. Other things foundationally, like first you form a habit, then that habit forms you. The putting a plan into place, all that stuff sort of resonated. But the positive negative thing, I understood like the negative, don't go there, but the positive thing never really resonated until I got my second year in college. I just finished my basketball season at Occidental in Los Angeles, and I got really sick, and they weren't sure what I had. They thought I had cancer initially. I ended up with shingles and all sorts of different colitis and all sorts of different stuff. But I had to drop out of college and kind of go through this really scary time, take a year off of sports. And when I was going through that experience, all of a sudden, the way I thought, Ben, Darren, Tyler, like now thinking didn't feel optional. Where in general, if I woke up and I wanted to be an asshole or sabotage myself psychologically, I could do it. But when you're sick, like you're no sicker the day after diagnosis than you are the day before. But I'm telling you, man, you feel differently.
Oh, yeah.
So your mind all of a sudden, being a dumbass with your mind and not like thinking about like, what am I saying out loud? What am I watching? What am I consuming? Like all that in 93, 94 became, oh my God, everything my dad's been telling me for 18 years, this shit's real.
Yeah.
Because, nobody knows that positive thinking, if it works or not, but everybody understands that negative thinking does work.
Right.
And it works negatively.
Yeah.
And from 83% or above, from the Mayo Clinic, the Cleveland Clinic, every study whether it's the externalization, the internalization, the consumption, the watching, is that negative thinking will fuck you up, and it will weaponize you against you. And so, that was, I graduated, played a couple of years of, I would call it pro soccer, but I lived with the lawn chairs in my apartment, so we didn't make any money. And I was going to grad school and teaching, but I taught 2 years in LA Unified School District, which was probably the best experience in the world for me, just because I had 150 kids, maybe 15 to 20 wanted to go to college. Yeah. I graduated a graduating class of 50 students, where 23 went to the Ivy League. Yeah. So it was massive for me to go into this 45 kids a class and get my ass beat, every day until I figured out how to talk to people.
Right.
I went there, and my girlfriend and I at the time were up hiking in Angel's Crest, and we got chased by a bunch of gangbangers. And I'd been in LA and I had no money. I was like, man, get me out of this place. Like, I love Southern California, but if you don't have any money, it's not a fun place to be always.
Yeah, that's hard living.
It's hard living. And so we moved to, my buddy was playing for the LA Galaxy, got traded to the Miami Fusion. We moved out with him in Delray Beach, Florida, started teaching there for 2 years, went to a coaching clinic, met Mark Verstegen, the great strength coach who formed Athletes Performance and Exos.
Yep.
And then wrote for an internship in the sports psychology department, wrote like 8 letters. My dad flew out, went and met with the guy, got an internship. And then 2001, was teaching at $33,000, took a pay cut to $26,000.
What were you teaching?
So great question. All social sciences. My master's was in social sciences, so I could teach anything from geography to U.S. history to psychology to, kind of everything. And I was teaching kind of like a sports psychology class. I was coaching men's and women's soccer, men's and women's golf. I did for 4 years. I coached club soccer for 8 years. So I really just kind of had that teaching education background. When I went to the clinic at IMG, I said, this is what, I want to teach, but I don't want to teach U.S. history. I'd rather teach sports psychology. And I'd had the exposure to my dad my whole life, who was an incredible teacher, ended up being one of the original authors of the Chicken Soup for the Soul book series, president of the National Association for Self-Esteem. I was a believer, and not in a way where I was trying to evangelize, but where I had unique empathy because of my own experience.
Right.
And enough athletic experience. So that was it. I got to Bradenton, and here I am. I'm going to start teaching, but I'm going to have to learn how to start teaching sports psychology.
Right.
Well, a second ago, you said when you got sick is when you flipped the switch in your mind.
Yeah.
That it wasn't bullshit anymore. This is legit. What did you want to be before you got sick? Was teaching always in the cards, or did that change once you got
professional soccer player?
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We and probably more so, and or I mean, you're Ben, you're putting my mind back to 18, like feeling like somebody say, what do you want to be? And you're just like, I want to be with her. Is that a job?
Yeah. But, and the reason I ask is because we talk about, somebody can say one thing and that totally changes your mind on a subject, or it gets you thinking and going down a different path, or an experience, like you said, you got sick and that changes you on a different. That's why I ask. I'm curious.
People always think, because of what my dad did, that I somehow grew up wanting to do this.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I interned with my dad. I mean, I was at a lot of his events. I sold books in the back and different things. I loved what my dad did. Don't get me wrong. But I never had ever thought about doing it.
Interesting.
Now I was uniquely probably engineered to do it, but my dad would never care it either. Like if I wanted to be a fireman, all my dad wanted, what I've learned, is that when life hit me, when I went through divorce, when I went through health challenges, went through personal things, financial lawsuits, whatever the stuff, and good stuff, success and all those things, what my dad wanted, and I figured it out after he died, was that I had a skill set to handle it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Almost like, wax on, wax off, paint the fence. You're like, why am I doing this, Ralph Macho? You guys, Ben and Tyler might be a little young, but I know Darren's with me. Then all of a sudden one day you're in this situation and you start using all this stuff because you were conditioned to do it.
Right.
And that's why, but I also will go with this as I go back to y'all. Think about, my dad was really good at teaching it. He wasn't, like an over the top life coach. He was practical. I mean, he dealt with organizations, the military. And at 18, I respected it. I followed the path. I didn't really believe it. Mm-hmm. And it took that for me to buy in. So that gives me such unique empathy to Darren's original question. Why aren't more people doing this? Look what it took for me to buy in.
Right. Yeah. True.
So that's why, I always was really careful, even as I started in this field, can I have a career in it?
Right.
And as we'll talk more, you ask questions, after 3 or 4 years, I moved out into the way broader training, licensing, the bigger stuff at IMG, where I could actually start to make some money, from that perspective.
Okay. So you're at IMG, and what's that transition to, working with athletes and prepping them for the combine and making sure that these young athletes are strong mentally? What takes you to these next steps and, ultimately, the Limitless Minds, organization that you partnered with Russell Wilson on?
That's a great question. Like, truthfully, I was so fortunate, and I think Chad would say the same thing, because guys like Darren or you guys were going to be going to Bradenton anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So if you signed with IMG initially, that's
let me stop you there. Nowhere ever was I on IMG's radar. They wanted nothing to do with me.
The unique opportunity is the athletes were going to be there.
Right. Yeah.
Right. But I was raised with the understanding to make the big time where you are. Mm-hmm. So I don't think the players at Alabama got a different version of me than the under 15 girls team I coached in Boca Raton, Florida.
Right.
Because my dad said, there's no point in trying to go someplace if you're not good where you're at right now. So a lot of it in the 90s, I was thinking, my mind was already there. I was making videos. I was studying great athletes. I was studying good performers. But what Bradenton did was 9 to 10 hours a day, you were going to teach classes. And for a lot of it, if I'm just being honest, it was just fucking babysitting.
Yeah.
It's 100 degrees out there.
Right.
Kids are sent from all over the world, 80 countries. So you're like, okay, you got these 3 tennis groups at 6 a.m., 8 a.m., and 10 a.m. And then you've got these 2 soccer groups, at 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. You'll have an intern with you here. And then here, these ones you're outside on a tennis court for an hour with 150 tennis players from Venezuela.
Well, and what was the age groups?
So the age groups from the camp perspective were usually that I would deal with 11 to 18.
Mm-hmm. But I can understand the frustration, right? When you say babysitting, right? Like, these kids are there because either their parents sent them there for these camps, or, hey, this is the next step for me to mark on my resume that I went through this IMG deal before the combine, whatever, right? Like, they're there by choice, obviously, but they're not there to really dig into it. And then if you're talking to 150 people, how much one-on-one connection and impact can you truly make? Yeah, you can give them tidbits. You can give them this, you can give them that. And I'm not downplaying your work, Trevor, by any means.
No.
But I get that frustration, right? It's just what impact am I truly making?
This is what I would say, Tyler. You could make the impact you wanted to make. So the reason I ended up getting a job was I was like, the first thing I did when I got there as an intern is I said, how does this sports psychology business make money? How do they make money? Because I was there with 9 interns, and I had never taken a sports psychology class, and they were all in PhD programs for sports psychology. I had a master's in social sciences, but my education came from how I was raised, and the practical nature, and I was way more of a teacher than a clinician. And I still played a lot, at that time athletically, so when I got there, this was fascinating. They sold packages. So if you were a student, you got 3 or 4 group lectures, but you could so Ben could buy a one-on-one package for 3 hours where he would meet and do an initial meeting. We would go out on the football field and film Ben, and we would film with no perspective, but him sort of seeing what a coach sees. We would come in and we would watch it together. And then we sort of evaluate his goals, his plan, things along those lines. And then I'd go out and watch Ben one more time. We'd give him his videotape, and then we'd give him like a 1 or 2 page write-up with some mental strategies. Well, you know, none of the interns were selling those things. Well, the first week I sold 17. And I got on the phone because you had to make calls, but nobody took it seriously. I made 500 calls, put a script together, called the parents, and basically just said, you just sent the kid here from fucking Venezuela. It's only $300 more. You already spent $1,500 more. Why wouldn't you?
Right.
You know, and just smoke people. Then I got to work with a lot of those things. Then the guy that was running it, a guy named Jeff Trosh, was like, I need dudes like this.
Yeah.
And then but to the broader point, as I got older, you could have 150 Venezuelans, but then you could do the adult group and have 16 CEOs from Sony that are down for a team building thing, playing tennis with Nick Bollettieri.
Yeah.
Then you could go, and then you could have, 12 basketball players, like a young, I can't remember the dude that played at UMass, Joe Lewis, or, you'd have these basketball. So your range was all over. So it gave you, first of all, huge humility. You never walked around like you were, like if you had a really good group of CEOs or athletes, in an hour, you're going to be on a tennis court sweating your ass off.
Right.
So like you never thought like, because a lot of times educators get egos and kind of all that stuff. That was never going to happen in Bradenton. Plus you look at your paycheck. So ultimately, the Verstegen said, we've never really done anything in the mental side. Do you guys want to take the football players a couple times a week? So yeah, do you want to take the minor league and the major league baseball players? Sheffield, Pat Burrell,
that's a hell of a group.
Lance Negro, Robbie Alomar, Mary Pierce. You had all those then. So yeah, and so immediately we found out about the Wonderlic. So we started studying it, and we got different tests, and we started teaching the guys. So the guys were an active audience. We taped specials talking about the Wonderlic. So they were engaged. And then over time, we started to add other things. We started making everybody their own video that we would put on a CD that they'd bring with them to the combine. We'd give them these things, all their best clips, best games from college football, combined with like a couple specials on guys who did well at the combine, like an Adam Archuleta or, something along those lines. And they just started fucking around and like trying to come up. And then Condon's like, hey, Sylvester Morris had really struggled at the combine, and he said, Trevor, why don't you start going, and then we'll get you a pass. So it's like 2001. I'm like 24, 25, and now I'm going to the combine. I'm sneaking in and around there in the past with the pass, dodging coaches, and then having the tape, meeting with the guys, and then Tom Coughlin hears about us for Fred Taylor, and Fred Taylor was their
running back. Fred Taylor.
Running back Fred Taylor, and they tried clinical
psychology. How many times he trucked you, Darren? None.
Fred was a damn good back though.
And they said, and so we get an invite to go meet with Tom Coughlin. This is Chad Bowling and I. So we get up there, walk into a room. Still one of the scariest moments. I'm shaking even thinking about it. So he invites us up, and he says, "Look, 10 years ago I could say my way or the highway. Now the players are saying, put me on the fucking highway. No one listens anymore. I need to try something different. We've tried clinical psychologists with Fred. I've heard you guys are just more like teachers and more practical, and it makes more sense and not clinical." And then, said, listen, in 40 years of coaching, I never thought I'd have to be sitting across from two fucks like you. where it's at, you got 4 minutes. Oh, and it was like, more or less, that was the conversation. He may have not used the F word quite as good as I did. But, so I look at Chad. Chad looks at me, and we just start talking. Hey, this is what we're doing, this, and this. 4 minutes goes to an hour. He says, can you come spend time with our coaches? We get our opportunity with Fred. And then Fred really was, and the book talks a lot about it, but Fred was a real learning platform for us. And then Fred went from missing 31 of 64 games to playing 46 in a row, retiring just behind Jim Brown, but with 11 or 12.5 all-purpose yards. And he probably legitimately would be in the Hall of Fame mix had he not played in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
respect from guys like Darren in the league, they know Fred Taylor.
Absolutely.
You know, we saw him every week, every other week, and then we would do different things with the team. But more kind of through the sports medicine side, like a Lance Walker or Coach Jurassic. Saban was ultimately so in Bradenton, I established, I got good at working with players, teams, and Serena, and they'd give me different people, and at different times, hey, she's here for 3 days. Can you do this? And then so I had a wider race. So it'd be like you training 6 sports.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to build a foundation. I started to realize like what works, what doesn't work. And I started seeing in positive thinking, the industry telling people to be positive. It's not resonating with people. So I started to go away from that message. And I started to make it, let's teach Darren the fundamentals of thinking, just the basic stuff, how we process information, how we learn, how movies affect us, and then let's show Darren through case studies. So we're watching things on Lance Armstrong, Jackie Joyner-Kersee, Michael Johnson, Emmitt Smith. And then we're cutting all that up and saying, why does Emmitt sound like Jackie? And why does Jackie sound like Lance when it comes to the way they plan their season out?
Right.
Could there be some universality relative to a common denominator that if you did too with your ability could help you? So everything was taught like that, as opposed to laying on the ground and breathing and be positive. You can do it and all that stuff. Not that there's not a time and place for that, but it was, and then plus you get videos and all that stuff. And so, so ultimately that made probably by 2005 where I was good at a field that nobody gave a shit about, but I was good at it.
But you cut your teeth. I mean, when you look at, listening to you and listening to your background, you cut your teeth as a teacher. How many kids were you around? How many times in the back of your mind, and I know your father played a huge role in, but in the back of your mind, when you're thinking all the kids that you came across, just as a teacher, as a social science teacher, and then going to Bradenton and seeing those same kids, how many, do you feel like you really cut your teeth then as to understand the mind and how the mind works?
Yeah. Thousands of kids. And I took, I have a ton of pride. My niece is with me now. She plays basketball at Point Loma. She's going to be a teacher. I love teaching. I just didn't like teaching social sciences.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But I loved teaching. And so I got better at the one-on-one. Tyler, you who'd met with Chad. Chad was so good one-on-one. Yeah. I sat in the same office with him. I learned from him. My personality was a lot more, how do we get information to everybody?
Yeah.
And then Saban would be, Darren, that person that when I came in to the Dolphins, I want something for everybody. And then, then in my mind, I'm like, well, nobody, it's hard to get 4 dudes on a team. If the Jaguars, we would do some group stuff, but Mike Ryan, the head athletic trainer, would basically be, all right, you're going to meet with, and then great guys like Leftwich. Leftwich trained at the draft with us in Bradenton, had a broken leg. You remember the famous carrying thing. So he stayed 6 months. Well, he would always be at Chad's house or my house.
Right.
So, but he never thought if you said, did you ever do sports psychology? He said no, but he was with us all the time.
Right. Soaking it in.
And so in Bradenton or in Jacksonville, every time I'd go in, I'd have a video for B-Left, and then we would sit down and talk for 45 minutes, but he would never think that he was meeting with a sports psychologist.
Right.
And or a mental coach or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that was really helpful for us. Someone, because I was with Byron the day he got cut.
Yeah.
And Jack sent me down there 4 months earlier when all the friction started happening between Del Rio calling him out publicly and Byron, and then they hired Munkin and Byron saying, hey, he needs to come up and meet with me. Byron wasn't returning Jack's calls. Then it was the pride and all that stuff. And then Jack calls me, which is rare. And I go up there and he says, hey, can you talk to Byron? I know your friends. I just need him to come meet the new coordinator. So I go down. Byron's training with Bomarito at the Hard Rock, and then he's at the Hard Rock Cafe. He's like, I know why you're here. Don't psychologize me. And then I just kind of went in and said, look, I'm just going to tell you, and then we just had a conversation. And I think at the end of the day, it was like, see this guy. So you saw 8, 9, 10 guys, and it was not clinical as much, Tyler, as more like they were
relational.
Relational, and then really good players.
Yeah.
And you're just helping them. Like I wouldn't have had the skill set for Randy Gregory. He would have needed, not that I couldn't have a relationship with him, but he would have needed somebody, I probably got like a 38 IQ, and he would have needed somebody, with a lot more ability.
Yeah.
What's interesting is, as you're sitting here talking about this, you're starting with the person you're talking to has a defense mechanism. They have a line of defense up, because as you're sitting there saying, like, I don't know about you guys, but I never put any thought into the mental side of the game growing up. It was all physical. How can I improve physically? And if you try to come talk to me about the mental side, what are you talking? Who are you? So you're having to break that down first, build a relationship, and then show the value of what you do.
But that's the power of the relationship aspect and the approach that way, right? Like, I'm not shoving it down. I'm not giving you a lecture. I'm not telling you you're doing this thing wrong. Like, it's the relationship aspect. And it sounds like you're reaching.
But what I did learn is, if you come in from the top down the right way and you know how to manage it, like when I came in through Nick and I got to do a lot of stuff with everybody, and I had already learned that. I'd worked with US Soccer and other things. But when you're in through the head coach and you get windows of time where you're sitting down with, 53 guys, 61 guys, 85 guys, and you like have a starting platform, then that's how 6, 7, 8, 9 guys are going to find you after, and you're going to build a relationship, particularly if you're plain spoken.
Right.
And if the message makes sense. But I also know, like, last year I started, I helped, now, like in my mid 40s, most of my buddies are either head coaches, coordinators, like you're either making it in the sport by now or you're not.
Right. Yeah.
So, one of my buddies got the GM job with the Mets. And so I was going to help him just for a year. I'll do X amount of days, then they'll bring in a full-time guy. But he knew I could come in and kind of create some buy-in. Did the same thing with the Angels a couple of years ago. And but I know when he's introducing me and the president's introducing me, 78 players, Major League camp, I know every one of those guys is looking at like, fuck this dude.
Yeah.
Like, I know that's where I'm starting, and that's no matter how they introduce me, where I've been, whatever. But that, like, I've learned that's got nothing to do with me. That's A, the industry. That's B, it's a confusing industry. And C, a lot of guys and gals that have been in this industry have done a shitty job.
Right.
So I if I can't get the pitcher to look at me, like my goal might be, all right, I'm going to go on this road trip and we're going to have 3 conversations. I don't care what they are.
Yeah.
And work. Because I want to get, Darren, like when I go to a team, I want to make an impact on everybody.
Right.
And that's why, like, I hold firm. I need 9 minutes with the group.
Yeah.
I need 13 minutes. I need something. And, and that's that, it's allowed me. But in 19 years, I've never signed more than a 1-year contract. And a lot of people would say I'm one of the better ones in this industry.
Yeah, but we'll say it for you. You are the best one in the industry. We'll say it. We'll be the ones to say it, so you don't have to. But have you found reaching the masses, you've been more successful by, hey, I'm going to address a 53-man roster in the front of a team meeting room on Tuesday afternoon as pre-scout, or, hey, I'm going to spend intentional time with 4 or 5 of the influencers in that locker room. Change those guys. Let them go change the rest of the team.
For me, I feel like you got to have access to the whole team.
Okay.
And because the video technology, like if you look at some of the stuff I have 3 guys led by this guy named John Schultz that make all these videos that are educational. We don't sell them, but they got everything about thinking, adversity, mindset, plus clips of you. I could have Ben at Abilene Christian. Ben might not even know clips exist. I might have Ben.
It's his mom's VHS recorder that she used to put up on her shoulder.
50 yards of yak. But like even my 8 years at Alabama, even like the toughest guys, they know if I'm coming in, we're gonna watch like a 5-6 minute video. and I'm going to talk 4 or 5 minutes. Then I have my different guys I meet with.
Yeah.
But all of the guys, like to a man, will say, hey, when you showing your video? So at a minimum, I've established a value in that educational, motivational place. And I'll never forget, 2 years ago, I'm with Jake Fromm, our quarterback.
Yeah.
We're at the Rose Bowl.
Yeah.
We're at the Rose Bowl getting ready to play Oklahoma. And all I really cared about this job is how do you build relevance? I know sports psychology, mental conditioning is only going to be 3, 4, 5% of the equation. They got to get big. They got to get fast. They got to get strong. They got to study film. They got to do all those things. But how do I establish myself so when someone like me is needed, I'm there and that I become just a part of what they do? Darren before the game, Tyler before the game. So I always have this window 2 days before the game or the day of the game where I'm going to show the whole team something. And then I get 5-6 minutes to talk right before our head coach does the team talk. And then that night or the morning, that's when I have like a conference room, small one. And that's where I meet with my guys. Could be all the receivers. Our receiver coach will walk them in like a Cortez Hankton. We'll walk them in and then we'll watch a video and then we'll kind of go through, hey, triggers, key things. If we didn't play well, why wouldn't we? You know, what are the 3 or 4 things you're focusing on if he goes in to man coverage? Like just simple things, you know, not like, hey, let's lay down and start thinking about climbing Mount Everest.
Yeah.
You know, unfortunately, the industry does. So, but I'll never forget, it's the morning, and in my mind, I'm thinking like, okay, I got to have a good plan for Jake. It's 18 years old. It's a national semifinal. So I'd been with Jameis Winston, and I know like saying his name, like people probably want to punch me in the face, but I like Jameis and I had a really good relationship with Jameis. I understand all the other stuff. You know, I'm not excusing that, but that wasn't where I lived with him. And Jameis was 18 years old when we won the national championship at Florida State and led a drive in 1:19 to come back and win that national championship game. And Jameis was 26-1 as a college football player. So I called Jameis and said, hey, I'm meeting with Fromm in the morning. Do you think you can jump on, maybe give him 15, 20 minutes? He said, yeah, what do you need me? I said, look, you were 18 when you played. He's 18. I don't care what the fuck you say, but you just whatever you want to say, I don't need to know. And so I meet with Jake. We kind of watch our video, and then we watch Jameis's final drive, you know, and all the audio, all the thing, and I have multiple TVs set up. And then I get a hold of Jameis. I said, do you have some time to talk to Jameis? And Jake's like, absolutely. So I step out of the conference room. I see Maria Taylor walking towards me. She's like, what's wrong with Jake? You know, because she's not only a commentator, but she's went to Georgia. And I was like, nothing. She's like, why is he meeting with you? Well, Jake and I meet every morning, you know, before the games.
The hell do you mean?
and I was like, man, this is just what we do. Really? Are you sure? You know, I just started laughing. And then that's just where this industry is going to live.
Right.
You know what I mean? And Jake's not going to go after the game and say like, but for me to be a part of those guys, and I met with 33 players the night before the game or the morning, you know, and that's, you know, and that is how I win. It's not a ton of money. Now that I'm moving into the business world, that's where you can make money. Right. The one thing I would say about my 19 years in sports, obviously I'm going to work this season with Mel Tucker. Right now, like everything's crazy. We're kind of trying to figure it out in the world, as you guys all know.
Well, it needs more than ever now.
Yeah,
you do. But so a lot of it, like I'll have Michigan State tonight on Zoom meetings. I'll have a couple basketball teams, and we're following kind of like 6 units. We have this plan. But, you know, like as a consultant, you can't even be on a campus right now.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know, and as a consultant, I don't want to be flying to a campus right now either. I mean, with some of the stuff that we just don't know. So I think what the sports world did, even though, you know, like Tony Robbins can stand on his, you know, wallet and talk to the clouds. You know, I've never been like that for me. But as I've transitioned more, Maria Shriver, President Kennedy's niece, invited me to LA and sat me down a few years ago. And she said, you don't even have any social media. You know, it's hard to find out anything about you. And yet I've learned this thing like neutral thinking and this different message that you're teaching. Instead of 150 athletes, you need to be speaking to 150 million people.
Right.
And I was like, man, I can't even win speaking to my fucking wife in my house. You know, like 150 million people. And then I just didn't believe it because you guys know the humility that sports gives you.
Yeah.
About the head coach, about the athletes. Like the athletes, I look at these Gary Vaynerchuk and all these different guys who are killing it. They're making money, and but their message is, I've made 800 million. Look at fucking me.
Yeah.
Look at me.
Yep.
And look, because I did it, you can do it. And if I was to do that to an athlete, he'd give me a half a peace sign so quickly.
Yeah.
It wasn't a thing. But now I'm learning.
Bro.
But I'm learning.
Yeah.
Like I need to go get social media. I hired Tony Robbins' PR firm. I'm selling a book. My agent.
What's the name of the book?
It Takes What It Takes.
Yep. Right here.
It takes what it takes. And so if it does take what it takes, you got to have social media. I'm not going to do it the way the others, but we're going to share our messages. We're going to talk. We're going to, I'm going to hire a PR firm. That I spent all the money I got for the book on a PR firm so I could get a second book. The book ended up being a bestseller, which is incredible.
Awesome.
I wrote it with Andy Staples from Sports Illustrated and now The Athletic. But most importantly, high school coaches, high school kids, teachers, business people. It's 12 chapters. It's simple. I told Andy, if a word has more than 2 syllables, we got to take it out. and I think it makes sense.
That's athletes.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying, Darren? Like,
Yeah.
now my mission, when Maria said that, at first I was kind of like, eh. But then like a month later, I'm like, a Kennedy's asking me to serve.
Yeah.
And she found me as a big deal. And I started thinking, well, how do you do this? And then out of the blue, Russell and I did an ESPN show, QB to QB.
Yeah.
So people like someone from HarperCollins saw it, and they had done who's the trainer? Jordan's trainer, Tim Grover.
Yeah, Tim Grover.
They'd done his book. Yeah, Tim Grover. They'd done Grover's book, and then they did Shoe Dog. And so they called me. I thought they were joking, so I called a bunch of my friends in Seattle, told them to stop pranking me. But then we did the book, and now it's interesting with Instagram and other things, and particularly as the world shut down, I actually can reach more people. Had I not done that, I wouldn't be on this show, and I'm learning the value strategically of getting your message out, but doing it in a way, trying to still maintain that edge in the sports world, and then build some relevance in the business world.
Yeah. So give us a little in-depth background on neutral thinking. I've always, it's always been, positive reinforcement.
Yeah,
positive
visualize
thinking.
making that interception. Visualize.
And again, I played in an era where you just work harder. You didn't think about it visually, but you always heard about positive thinking. Give us more in depth and a lot of color on neutral thinking.
Okay, so first of all, this has been a blast because you guys have asked a lot of questions that I think have got us to the point where, if I'm listening to this podcast, and I know you've got a kind of a wide audience, now it makes sense to explain it. Some people will start just like, what's neutral thinking? And
right.
If you don't understand the industry, you don't understand why you would change a word. It wasn't innovation for innovation's sake. It was innovation so I could have a fucking job. Particularly when your population's all the players.
Right.
And not that all the players like you, but that it all makes sense and or utilize you. So as positive thinking I started our first year at Alabama. We were 6-6, and myself, Kevin Elko, Lonnie Rosen, we had different people, Nick had been using, kind of coming in, Elko's a great platform speaker, a lot of Christian topics. And then after the season, we played Colorado in like the Donkey Bowl in Shreveport. And classic, like I go to bed at like 1:00 and it's 5 a.m. and I get a private call. And the only private call back then was Nick Saban. And I'm like, and coach is like, hey, can you come down, start talking about next season? I was like, oh, we had 4 fucking hours to enjoy that bowl game. And so, I walked down and he was going to give me a voice. Like, what do you think? And I said, I think that, how we did it this year, I came in periodically, like I could affect and motivate, like for willpower. I could get somebody to think about it in that moment, but willpower will always get its ass kicked to who you really think you are.
Yep.
You know, like, so if you get excited about changing, then all of a sudden it gets harder. You're like, yeah, that ain't me. And so I told coach, I said, you know, we've got this window in the summer with 7-on-7 and lifting. What if we built in like a mental conditioning component within that time frame? And NCAA, we used weightlifting hours, and Coach Cochran and I kind of worked that out. Scott Cochran, who was a strength coach at the time, just starting. He'd been an assistant in the NBA. And so he said, I like the idea. He said, can you come every week? And I was like, I know, I got 80 employees in Bradenton. By that time, I'd taken over as the director of performance at Bradenton to oversee everything when it came to training, just to make more money and to grow a little bit more, and do bigger contracts. So we found the Pacific Institute, ironically. My dad started a company that had a kind of a program, and twice a week, at the end of their weight room lifting sessions, we got the guys in, and we had like a basic plan around the fundamentals of the mind. And it was simple and it was educational. And just by getting those guys together, starting the conversations, getting the different groups, at the end, we kind of created this marketing campaign for them, and the Pacific Institute did a great job. I came in multiple times to follow up on the same message. And we went from, 6-6 to 12-0. And what we did was we built like an alphabet, and then we could take those words during the season and everybody had like a common language. And I started to realize that positive thinking wasn't the sell. And when I was talking to coach going into our third year, that what our players did understand was that negative thinking wasn't going to help them. And whether they were, a high population coming from single parent backgrounds, high population coming from families below the poverty line, they wanted to make it, but they didn't want bullshit.
Right.
And so I spent a lot of time studying negative thinking. How is it carried? Like, how do you change it? What's the easiest way to do it? Harvard, Georgetown, all these different places. And what we found out was that negative thinking was most powerfully carried by a team's language, an individual's language, an organization's language. And that anytime you say something out loud, it's 10 times more powerful than when you think about it.
Yeah, but you know what? You're talking about players. Like, listen, let's call it what it is. 80% of that locker room was black.
Yeah.
I don't know the percentage of coming from a single parent family is in that.
It was between at that time 70 and 90.
Unbelievable.
Jeez.
But you're talking
about a different area in the country too. Absolutely. And you're talking about the negativity that they have experienced their entire life. And taking them out of that negativity and giving them something, I wouldn't say positive, but I would say something, you're taking them to a neutral place. Right. Well, first of all, what you're doing is you're going to be realistic with them. So this is what we know about this piece of your overall human performance puzzle. So I believe the mind is somewhere between 3 to 5% of a football player's career. So that's what I believe. You can debate it, but I just don't think as tough as you can be mentally, if you don't have the body, if you don't have the physiology, if you don't take care of yourself, if you don't recover, if you don't do all those things. Now, I think the mind can dictate a lot of that, so you can move the percentage, but you're only going to have a limited time you're going to spend talking about it, because so much of football and all sports need to be dedicated to studying film, playing, practicing, etc. And you're not going to change those stereotypes of which they've been doing that for years. So to get that weight room time, but basically what we said is we showed articles, examples, tons of mic'd up stuff of who was Mike's best buddy, Rod, or that played for the Cowboys.
Mike Roden would be early on in his career.
Yeah, Michael's best buddy was one of the DBs with you guys, Ray Crockett.
Oh, Ray Crockett. Yeah, Crockett was with the Broncos.
Yes. Okay, with the Broncos. Yeah. So I think they both went to Skyline or whatever. But we'd get all these mic'd up footage, and the mic'd up footage you could get from the NFL was fascinating because you had so many guys saying all the wrong shit, so many guys saying the right things, and then you'd have the outcome of like what happened after they said it. So like we start just getting all this information and putting together this plan. And basically what our players understood, anything I think, let's not worry about that. If it's a good thing I'm thinking, if it's a bad thing. If I say something out loud, it has 10 times the power of me thinking it. So if I'm thinking, God damn, it's hot out here, versus why are we in our third practice? This shit's 104 degrees.
Sounds like football players, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Right? So what we were able to prove was that negativity was 40 to 70 times more powerful than positivity.
Jeez.
So when I externalize the heat, my frustration, all those things, I increase the probability that what I said is what will happen by 40 to 70 times.
Why is that?
Okay?
Why when you verbalize that?
Well, first of all, the verbalization is almost like putting a nail into the thought, because in your mind, it's not in your mind until it comes out. It's just something that could be. When you say it, it becomes more practical. It just is what it is, like. And that negativity, going back to 10,000 years ago, we're wired to receive negativity much more effectively than to receive positivity. Wow. So if you look at it, so when I say something out loud that's negative, it's 40 to 70 times more likely to happen. And we showed them tons of examples, like a Bill Buckner. We showed him Bill Buckner 12 days before the World Series, 1986, Gold Glover for the Red Sox. He's being interviewed about the World Series. He says, the dream would be obviously to win it, but my nightmare would be to let the game-winning run score on a ground ball through my legs.
Oh, goodness Lord.
He
he spoke it. Like you're speaking it into an existence, and basically.
And he shows it, and he plants it in his mind subconsciously. He doesn't want it to happen. And then we go right from that. Then we set up the game. We show Mookie Wilson. We show it go under his legs. And our players go, fuck.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, so nothing I'm saying is a reach. And then there's articles I shared with them an article of a guy who got locked inside a refrigerated boxcar that moved meat from one place to another. He's in this freezer, starts panicking. He's writing down, I'm becoming colder. I'm freezing to death. Hours later, they open up the car. The temperature was 56 degrees. Turned out the freezing apparatus was broken. There was no physical reason for his death. All they explained, because he thought it, he talked himself into dying. And example after example. And just, if you go on the internet, type the power of negative thinking, it's just way more powerful than the other. Look at our politics today. A negative message versus a positive message, not even close.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's what our media thrives on, right?
Right, and our media. So what I learned in the special operations community, that these guys, like study new media, they teach them, okay, well, who pays CNN for advertising? Who pays Fox? Who pays MSNBC? Who pays CNBC? So they learn that. Then as they watch it, they can watch it responsibly, because the media doesn't have a responsibility to be truthful.
Right.
They have a responsibility and so like, it's a lot of times it's like, if you want to get truthful, maybe your best chance is the BBC. And so you have the externalization. So just understanding that, Darren, it was like, what if we could get these guys to stop saying stupid shit out loud?
Right.
Right. That's all.
God.
Yeah.
And that's all. Just don't say it out loud. And because there was no science that said venting's good for you.
Right.
A lot of times we want to vent, but there's nothing that says you need to vent to move on.
Yeah, you know what? I got a question for you, because there's like the negative side, because football players, we're always negative.
Oh my gosh.
Bitch and complain about everything. Oh God, it's too hot outside today.
Why are we in pads?
Why are we in pads? We should be in shells today. What, there's always an argument there. But I've seen, listen, I've played with some of the most confident players ever, the Michael Irvins, the Deion Sanders. And I can remember, like, I read a story about Barry Bonds years ago where he would walk up to the plate and say, I'm the baddest motherfucker out here ever. Like, I am the guy. And he would say it into, like, he would speak it into existence over and over and over again. Is there a problem with, because I've never, it's hard to deal with a guy like that in the locker room all the time. But at the same time, you have to appreciate the way they approach things in a way where they speak positivity all the time. And Deion Sanders, who we're going to have on the show at some point. But Deion was a guy who would always, these guys kill me about that.
Ninth time you said that.
Yes, I know. But Deion was always a guy who always was, overly confident.
Right.
Like, I'm going to shut Jerry Rice down, period. And he would say it over and over again.
I get it. That's where this whole thing gets fucked up, though. Because, Deion and Barry obviously raised by Bobby, they have done, I worked for Florida State for 10 years, so I know what Deion did behind the scenes, particularly as a college player.
Worked.
So he worked. He had this unique thing where the words were a superficial part. It was built, in that weight room and in the film and in the study and with Tom Shaw and all those different types of things. So what we believe is the science just says when you talk about the heat, it moves your mind there, and you're 70 times more likely to be thinking about the heat when you should be thinking about your one-on-one matchup or whatever coverage you're in. But you got to respect guys' right to still say stupid shit, but it's contagious.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So we just want our guys to know. We show them data. We give them articles. We give them videos. This is the power of negativity. You can still be that way, but what you'll see over the long course is the people that succeed at a higher level diminish the negativity, not in the mind, but what they say out loud. I even showed them last year Jim Lovell's press conference after Apollo 13, after they got back from the ship exploding in the moon. Mm-hmm. And I said, listen, is he negative, neutral, or positive? 208,000 miles away and your ship explodes on the moon. And he wasn't negative and he wasn't positive, but he was neutral. And so what's neutral? So neutral basically is like, okay, whatever just happened, good or bad, is real. Where positive thinking loses people is it requires you to go from a state of negativity to this new state at a speed that's not natural. You're going through a divorce. I remember when I was going through mine, people were saying, well, think about all the people you get to meet and date now. I'm like, fucking date. I got married not to date. And so that wasn't, it was more, what I needed to hear was more, I know how much you meant to you. I'm sorry. How are you feeling? And I know that sucks. So, but if I was negative, then I'm going to go on our Facebook page for an hour. And for every 30 minutes you visit an ex significant other's social media, it takes you an additional 2 weeks to get over them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So there was a series of things I could do that wouldn't be negative, but I wasn't positive. It was more like, this is real. What happens next has nothing to do with how I feel, but what I do.
Right.
So neutral is, all right, we just won the Super Bowl. It's great. It's real. We earned it, but that has nothing to do with what happens next. Mm-hmm. And I also, like Russ, 124 million people watching, takes him down, throws the pick at the 1 yard line. That's real. Mm-hmm. He owns it. That's true. And at that moment he went back and he watched the film, and for 10 days he was in pain, didn't sleep for 6 days. On the 10th day, he texts me, need to have the best off season ever. Time to hit the reset button.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
I talk in the book and all we did was, this is real. He went in, he got graded for the game. He evaluated it. We left Seattle. We went down to San Diego. What can we do? Train. That's what we control in our off season. And so we found, Ryan Flaherty, a really good trainer for him, and then started focusing. And then what I did was every morning, because I go back and forth between San Diego and Arizona, I would show him fourth quarter comebacks going back to high school. And I had them all on video. And we just watched fourth quarter after fourth quarter. So what's the truth? A neutral thinker is a truth-based thinker. I typically finish. That's who I am based upon what I do. If I go back to doing that again, that's how I'm going to finish again. And then I had a great offseason. And that next year I had 34 touchdowns, 7 picks, best season of his career.
Yeah.
But it was based on what he did. So, to me, the idea of I'm the best player in the world, that's why people don't do sports psychology, because they think it is like that, when it really needs to be, all right, you know what? I was in a situation where had I completed that pass, I probably make $30 million more in my next contract. I got 2 Super Bowls in 3 years, big deal. But that's not how it went for me. So what can I do now? And then your language is about having a really good off season, focus on increasing my speed, really working on my top end speed. Don't want to get caught from behind anymore. Throwing to our receivers down here. Going to take our team to Hawaii, help us move. Like all he's talking about is the things he's going to do, not winning or losing. And that's where neutral lives. It's truth-based, non-judgmental thinking. That's what happened. Or really good. Shoot, I had the Pro Bowl, had an incredible year. That's phenomenal. But then now I need to study what I did so I can do it again.
So you're staying in the medium. Basically, you're not going too high and you're not going too low.
Yeah.
Just going to the truth.
Yeah.
And then when they understand the power of negativity, which you've already taught them, then they know that talking about it, dwelling on it, watching it, he knew he needed to watch it because that's what you do after games. He did it after he won one. He did it after he lost the Super Bowl.
Man, that's being consistent. Yeah. That's being consistent. Right, because, listen, I can't remember. I can tell you how many times, damn, I wish I would have had your ass back in the day, man. This is bullshit.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you earlier. What was Darren, you personally, what was your relationship with mental training throughout your career?
You know what? It's crazy because we're talking about this, and I could see early, I could actually imagine myself early in my career thinking, oh, I got this handled. I got this handled. I can do this. I'll be all right. I don't need anybody to help me out in this. And then as I've got older, probably like about 26, 27, as I came in as about 21 years old, 26, then I've had a whole bunch of failures. And now I'm starting, that doubt creeps in. And when the doubt creeps in is when I definitely would have been thinking, okay, I need someone to mentally help me through this process.
Mm-hmm.
What if you grew up in a program like Georgia or Alabama where it was just part of what you did?
That's phenomenal. That's what I'm saying. Arizona State should be on your list.
Sick. You don't need to be sick to get better.
Exactly. You already have the resources right there.
Right. That's the problem with the industry because Georgia, we got multiple people from clinical to other things, but there should be what I love about Chris Herron, and Tyler, Chris Herron.
Yes.
Chris is some level of Chris and I have been friends for a long time and we're contemporaries in basketball. He was much better, but I was out at his facility a couple of years ago and we were, he was talking about some type of education. Russ and I have been talking about around the mind, around wellness, around, starting in first grade. And he was like, I'm thinking 10th grade about fucking taking geometry. When's the last fucking time I've seen that rhombus? And some of this stuff could really help. And I think that's where we need to go. So from my perspective, I'm always teaching. So Darren, I think had you met me and I had 11 minutes in the meeting or whatever, it would have been reinforcing what already made you good.
Right.
And you would have been getting some basics that are learning, like Ben might teach on the lifting side with nutrient timing or fueling or when to drink water or not eating after 8 o'clock. Fred Taylor, the chapter on Fred's incredible. What I would say about Fred is I'll never forget, and I'm open about it because he's open about it. When we sat down with him, Chad and I, Tyler, said, man, what do you want to do? Once he knew, because a lot of it in the NFL, you have to get good at establishing your distance from the coaches, because I want to make sure I can help them too, because they need help. Let's be honest. But I want to give them education to help them. But my relationships with the players are between me and them.
Okay, so that's a question I would have for you is back to, a lot of the players will be a little concerned about, okay, what's going back to the coaches or what's going back to the organization.
Yes. 100%.
And keeping that separate is awesome.
Yeah, and you just now I've learned to do it. The NBA is the only place. Anytime I've been to the NBA, I've just sucked ass. I just can't figure it out really. I don't want to affirm that, but the players are so dominant within that league that coaches are afraid. I'm last time. Well, I would say this time with the team I'm working with, I'm more of an advisor. And the second time when I was with Oklahoma City, I had a blast with Billy Donovan for a couple seasons. But you have to have like a really, good understanding of like when the general manager will hire me, I'm going to be like, look, I'm going to be out on that court talking to Billy Donovan because I want to talk to Billy. And then I also might be out in that court, talking to Paul George.
Right.
Like I don't want to be you to worry that I'm talking to Billy.
I love all these
Paul's
Christmas
gonna
Day
be talking.
references.
You know what I mean? So I think that's one of the things. And my last point before I'll let you guys ask some more questions, but is why hasn't it grown? Think about the success you guys have had in your own lives or in your career, and you're around sports, and you still really have no understanding of like what you would be looking for if you were going to hire somebody.
Yes.
What your expectations should be for him or her, and then how it should help you, and so that is why I have such empathy. Then as I started looking at the business world, I'd be like, okay, I'm flying to Athens, Georgia, getting in at 1 a.m, getting up at 6 a.m, working till 11 o'clock at night, going back and doing the same thing for the 3 days I'm there. This dude, whose message is nowhere near as battle-tested as mine, is getting on a plane, going here, talking for 90 minutes, and making 20 times what I'm making the same day. And then Chad and I used to talk about that, and I was like, who's the dumbass? I'm the dumbass. That guy's smart enough to not want to be on the plane.
Right.
Because the industry is the business world, because the business world gets it.
Yeah.
Like it gets it. You got all these, and I think the market is, I don't think you need 8 PhDs to write a book. I don't think mindfulness is the brand that we should have. I think people just need basic fundamentals, and they're on their way. And I don't think you need to do it every day. I just think, I think of myself, Darren, like in like Russell Wilson's career, as there's a speed limit, and it says, 75, on the grapevine, and that I'm sitting above the speed limit, and I'm a digital readout. Hey man, you're going 88. And that's how I can help them sometimes.
Which we all do on the grapevine, by the way. Yeah.
What's that? Yeah.
We all do on the grapevine.
So let's go back on that. The part of it I really want to focus on is, let's say I have a senior in high school.
Yep.
And had a bad game. Football player, quarterback, had a bad game. Just threw 4 interceptions and has to move forward. And as a kid who's 17 or 18 years old, has to overcome that. And there's a lot of kids that's the struggle.
Yes.
Is overcoming the negativity. And there's in today's world, it's not just about it's social media. It's so much. Give us a little bit of something. Let's say the kid's name is Joe Green out of Seattle, and he threw 3 interceptions. Give us something that you would have that conversation with Joe the next day.
So I would probably show him a press conference where Russ threw 5 picks against Green Bay, and I would show him Russell immediately after the game, talking about it, owning it, explaining it, and then I would probably show him the midweek press conference on Thursday, and then Russell's outcome the next game. I'd cut that up a little bit because you'd see how his language led his emotions. Mm-hmm. And I think in the press conference in Super Bowl 49 with Russ, followed by the next year with Cam in Super Bowl 50, and I love Cam. He trained down Bradenton, one of my all-time favorites of people, Cam Newton, and I got to spend a lot of time with him with Ken Dorsey and Vinny Testaverde and Winky and George Whitfield, and like Russell immediately went to, this is what I need to do to get me and this team forward. Whereas Cam, which I don't think there was anything wrong with what he did, led by emotion. And,
right.
And got up and walked out of the press conference. Then the next day he said, you show me a good loser, I'll show you a fucking loser. Mm-hmm. And I understand exactly what he meant. The problem was you can't move forward thinking that way. And truthfully, for whatever reason, Cam's never been the same. I'm sure a lot of it's physically since that press conference.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so what does that mean about Russell? What does that? So I think a lot of it is, hey man, you have to acknowledge that you threw those picks.
Right.
And so, but you got to go to the truth of those picks. What's the truth? Were you leaning back so your shoulder dropped and you were sailing it? Did you rush it? Did he run the wrong route? You know, what are the things that happened? Was it a good throw? You know, and evaluate it. And then what's in your control next? Practicing well, the discipline probably to steer clear of social media.
Right.
If you need that from the outside in, it's a problem because, you know, I mean, I've talked to multiple guys where they feel like that ended their career, you know, so, but just be mindful. Negativity is powerful, and then really focus on, all right, we're playing, you know, Allen High School. All right. What are the things that we need to do well versus Allen, and how do I impact that? And what can I do to build my confidence in the game plan? Can I throw some quick routes? Can we do some different things going forward? But if I am what I do, then when I don't, I'm not. Right. I can't be what I do. I can't be 5 touchdowns doesn't make me better than 5 picks. Mm-hmm. You know, my respect for myself has to be unconditionally. And that's where you can make fun of self-esteem all you want, but having a healthy self-esteem as a senior means you can handle 4 picks.
Right. Yeah. That point right there. Yeah. Well, I'll just say that point right there is what I've been thinking for the last 20 minutes of this conversation is how much of your message is who am I versus what I do? Yeah. Like for me, for instance, my career was ended. I've talked about this before. My career was ended by a knee injury. That was my last game was I tore my ACL. I had spent so much time focused on what I did. I never spent any time on who I was. And so for years after that injury, I'm depressed. I'm thinking, what am I worth now? Because I never spent any time on myself and who I am. So I'm wondering how much of your message is focused on who you are versus what you do.
Well, I also think about how many people it's not about who they are, but who they think they're not. Mm-hmm. Well, I don't have what Tyler has. Right. I didn't grow up the way Darren has. So I'm constantly comparing myself to who I think I'm not. Like, do you want to know the secret to Russell Wilson? The most incredible thing, because I can tell you, I promise I've learned a lot more from him than from me, than he's learned from me. And I think the secret is Russell is so focused on using the gifts that he has. That's it. Mm-hmm. He knows he's not 6'4". He knows he doesn't have very specific things that certain coaches and programs are going to want. He is at peace with that. He knows his team is missing key elements. You're never going to hear him complain about the offensive line. You're never going to hear him say we don't have weapons. He never even talks about it. Now, do he and his agent have the strategic things to build the organization? You know, that maybe that's happening, but you're not going to catch him say, you know, why don't I have Joe Thomas?
Right. Yeah.
There's nothing he can do about it. Mm-hmm. So this is what he's got. I mean, I'm watching, I'm with the family, and we're playing the Eagles. And in the fourth quarter, 2 guys caught balls that I didn't even know their names.
Yeah.
I'd never even heard of them before. One of them, it was his first catch of the season. And he doesn't – that's what he's got, right? So how many people are spending their lives thinking about what they don't have rather than I'm 5'10", you know, how do I maximize that? How do I develop my lateral quickness? I got big hands. How do I use that? You know, like how do I use the things I have? And if I don't make it, I lay it all out there. It's not because I didn't give the gifts I have the best chance. I learned that, you know, as a college basketball player. My second game was University of San Diego. I got dunked on like 4 minutes in. I said, yeah, I do not deserve to be playing college basketball.
Wait. You had balls in the face the whole 9?
The whole 9, D. And that moment lives with me my whole career. I never overcame it. I shoot 1,000 jumpers a day. I was never going to be great, you know, but I could have been better. Yeah. You know, so I think that's to me, I'm a big believer in you can do yourself into changing your feelings. Mm-hmm. So if I start walking, you know, in the morning and I get myself set multiple alarms, halfway through that walk, I'm going to be glad I walked. Yeah. I think my behavior precedes my success. Yes. And as you guys, 8 months into this podcast, how are we going to be one of the best like you're not going to be the best constantly comparing yourself to Joe Rogan.
Right.
You got to figure out, are there some things I can learn from Joe Rogan?
Mm-hmm.
Or Adam Carolla or Jim Rome or whatever. But how do we take what we bring, with our star athlete, with our player, with our physiological fitness and understanding, and the places we go, and bring them forward, get good guests, do what good podcasts do.
That's right. Trevor, I got a question, kind of piggybacking off a lot of this. Ben asked, like, okay, hey, it's what I do versus who I am and all that, right? But as you're giving these athletes, these businesses, tips on, hey, how do we address it? How do we change our thinking? How do we stay neutral? All those things. But how much are you addressing with these individuals who they are, where they came from, what has been ingrained in them as a child? Because I think of it as two ways, right? Like, are you growing or are you gaining, right? Are you growing, like you're changing, like you're actually changing what you've been wired to do over years and years of experiences, versus, hey, here's some tips on how to increase productivity, be more effective, make more money, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
What is the balance between those two as you are talking with clients, teams, whoever it may be?
So I'm a big believer in developing a real foundation for the organization. Mm-hmm. So like before you can start specifically saying, okay, well, how are you guys targeting your marketing? How are you targeting North Texas versus South Texas? Things like that. Mm-hmm. I don't get there for a long time. Like for me, there's kind of these units, these pods where we got to understand outside effect inside effect outside. What does a movie do to me? What does watching TV do to me? What does music do to me? How can I influence myself? How does Ben influence me? How does my family background connect? But it's kind of all broad and establishing a foundation. Almost like knee skips, and it's really working on something that you're going to apply later. And then I think as you've established that, then you start evolving more into the individual. And so I have, a handful of CEOs, top military, top business people, where even as I do them individually, they still need the foundation.
Yeah.
And this is where I think in my mind, and I really appreciate that question, where the change around psychological growth can occur if we demystify it. Like if we go right to the core, the families, the parents, or we go right to meditating, or we go right to these things, hey, just be positive, we're going to lose people quick.
Yeah.
If we go more to the simple things like, what do I say out loud? Because this is the power of it. Mm-hmm. What do I watch? 3 minutes of cable news before 9 a.m. increases your probability by 27% to say you had a terrible day. 27%, 3 minutes of news. Wow. Imagine now, right? And music is one of the most powerful predictors and perpetuators of our performance. You're going through a difficult situation personally, and you listen to difficult situational music that makes you sad personally. You're going to facilitate that. You change that music, and you get to the science of chord progressions, keys, etc. It changes how your body feels, changes your chemistry, and so I think, what are all the things that I can control? I always control what I say out loud. No, like Tyler, you're always in control of what you say out loud. Well, what does the psychological world try to get you to do? Change what you think inside. That's fucking hard, bro. I've been around tons of athletes. Darren's had nights before or days before games where his mind's been, oh my God, I got this and that, but he's not talking about it. Game gets there, only think of one thing at a time, and he's going to kick steps, going whatever he's got to do, and that's where his mind goes, and he plays a good game, But when he starts talking about it, he's on his phone, man, I don't know how I match up with this person, and he Bill Buckners himself, So just giving people the basics first.
Yeah, the foundational truths that apply to everybody across the board, as opposed to what's necessarily true to you right now, specifically.
That's how I think, and I think a lot of that truth, Tyler, is like just because I don't see myself any different really than a U.S. history teacher.
Yeah.
And I know that we're going to start out U.S. history in 8th grade, executive, legislative, judicial. at least when we did have 3 branches of government.
See, he's just speaking truths. It's neutral. It is what it is.
And we're going to go through, but you know, the 8th grade version of U.S. history versus 11th grade regular U.S. history versus AP U.S. history, they're all different. Information is similar, but like I just think the mind has been presented to all of us, including me, starting with like the most complicated elements.
Yeah.
And I just think if you learned how to be less negative, or your son, that quarterback, learned how to be less negative and never ever learned how to be more positive, but just learned how to be less negative, it would change his life forever.
What do you think about surrounding yourself with that? I mean, look, going into a CEO, let's say you're going into a business and it's a CEO, business has been bad, coming off COVID and businesses has been down. I mean, what is your approach? Are you going to specifically the CEO, or are you bringing the entire C-suite group in for a conversation?
So Limitless Minds, like, you know, my company, Moawad Consulting, is really more athletes and some teams, how I kind of do that. Limitless Minds, our goal, Russ and I, was like, how do we affect the highest volume of people? It's not going to be me flying on a plane. I can do that a handful, certainly now, but back then, like, we had to create digital content. We had to create videos, micro videos, education. So it's staying with you all the time. Pops up on our app. You get a 90-second video. It's Russ, whatever. It's reminding you on how to stay neutral today, all those things. We did a really good job building it. Russell's older brother, Harrison, and his business partner, DJ, were in the pharmaceutical space, which you guys know is a ton of money.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then Russell's brother was with Harrison, was with us the night before one of the Super Bowls, and just sat in there as big bro and listened to what me and Russ were doing before Russ went from the house he was renting, where he could kind of chill out and go back to the game, or go back to meetings, or chapel, I think it was, the night before the game. And he literally said, why does my brother get training and educational stuff that I've never fucking heard in the business world? I don't hear anything about neutral, negative, these, you know, conversations, or even just had the conversation situationally about if the game didn't go well, what happened, how we play. If you sit back at the end and you're able to look back and you feel really good about a team performance, what are 4 or 5 things that had to happen, and how did you influence those? You know, just but just all behavior, not outcomes, not 6 touchdowns or any of that stuff. That's going to happen if you do it right. And you got to get lucky to have a big offensive game in your league. The defenses are really good. So we started and we went to Seattle, where Russ is from, where I grew up. And Goldman Sachs got 15 high earners worth $25 million or more. Russell got them into a room, and I talked to them for 2 hours. And we said, this is what we teach. Do you think this would be resonate in the business world? Because what I had to keep telling Russell, because athletes think anything they do is going to work. Right. I said, it's only going to make sense if the business market is interested in what we've been teaching. If they're not, you know, if everything's about meditation or whatever, or they want to go back to Dale Carnegie's sales training, then let's not even mess around with this.
Right.
And right away, you know, so you had the top guys at Amazon, Microsoft, Starbucks, and they were, you know, if we had a business plan ready, they would have probably signed LOIs at that time. So we knew we had something that was interesting, and now I think we've got something, and I think uniquely, like we just did a webinar together for 127,000 people. Like as challenging as this has been, I think a lot of us have learned to be a little more fluent with this technology, and in some ways you can reach more people. So that was really the goal, I think. Ben, is that, you know, Tyler, is how do you reach more people? And so the business will basically hire us. A lot of times it might be starting with a Zoom, a bigger conversation, probably 2 or 3 with like the oncology division of a pharmaceutical unit or the aerospace division of one of those things. We'll talk to a division, everybody, we'll give them the basics, and then we drill down and we have subcomponents, follow-ups, customized podcasts, all those elements just for that division, just for that group.
Okay. All right. So I want to ask a couple random questions here. Early in the conversation, you talked about being brought in to help guys at the combine, and there's certain guys that just didn't do well at the combine. Why do some guys that physically maybe are exceptional and they're a 4.4 guy and they can they got a 37-inch vert, but they go to the combine and they don't perform well? What are the reasons for those guys not actually reaching their potential on a day like that?
Yeah, so I've been with a few of them, and one that really jumps out at me is like Mohamed Sanu.
Yeah.
Like in my mind, because I live with Mohamed. So psychologically, there's a truth called the law of substitution. So on average, subconsciously, we have 800 to 1,400 words moving through our mind a minute. Like if I was to ask, hey, Ben, do you ever find yourself over the course of a day, not out loud, but just in your mind talking to yourself? If Ben's like, no, and then I say, what are you saying to yourself? Ben's like, I don't think I talk to myself as I talk to myself, right?
Right.
we all do it.
Yep.
That voice has influence, but not the power of when Ben speaks it out loud. But also the other truth is, Tyler, at any given moment, you can only think about one thing at a time. So as soon as your mind goes to stay low, drive my hand forward, look for the hips to drop, as soon as my mind goes to a specific thing, everything's blocked out. So like the idea is, as like, let's say Florida State 2013, we walk in to play Clemson, 90,000 people, every alumni that's ever been there, the crowd, all the things. The simple truth is, if my mind's on, okay, these are the 4 or 5 things I need to do to play well, which I work with our guys all summer. And I got it from Michael Johnson, just like this. He just called it his grocery list. He said, I go into Safeway, I write 8 things down. I walk in Safeway, I walk out. If I don't, I'm in aisle 9 going, the fuck am I doing here? As opposed to, so, like, what are the things? So if I can get my mind there, I think that's really, really powerful. And then, so I go into the game and I'm focused there. As soon as, so I can only think about one thing at a time. As soon as I shift and I start looking at the crowd or start engaging, my mind immediately goes there, and it can't be thinking about driving my hand forward. So what I learned from Michael Johnson was, it's okay to be distracted as long as you recognize it, and you can get yourself back to what you should be thinking about.
Right.
Yeah.
What happens in Indianapolis, A, you don't have the external stimuli of a crowd. B, you start seeing these guys at the starting line, and you start looking, saying that's Al Davis or that's Tom Coughlin. That's the things, and your mind goes there. And then C, you start going away from your script. That somebody like Ben worked on with you, drive my arms forward, high knees, picking my spot that I'm looking for. And the moment consumes you because you're doing the things that are giving the moment an opportunity, as opposed to really understanding this is what it looks like, this is what it sounds like, this is what it is. I was with Anquan Bolden too. Anquan ran 4.7. Your boy Romo might still be running his 40. I was with Tony at that one. I'll never forget. He came early to throw balls, and then
Antonio,
the speed guy, and like Romo literally like stands up, like waves to people, that starts running. Faster than he ran. But So
why does Brady get so much crap when Tony should too, right? Like they both wore the nasty grays. I mean, it was just like,
So Tony used to come down to Bradenton from Eastern Illinois in the off seasons. He was friends with Dan Henson, Drew Henson's dad.
Yeah.
And so I knew Tony forever. Just I'm obviously not as much in the last 15 years. I hear from Chad, but he's just a good dude. Every night, man, he came over. We'd watch movies and we'd go out and throw. And then I remember we kind of kept talking like, hey, I know you're here to throw for all these other guys, but you're going to have your opportunity. Truthfully, it was like the last of 7 days for him because he'd come early. So I just think he was just like, what does it matter? But I think he had he ran better, I think he probably would have gone in the 6th round.
Okay.
No question, because even Byron and Tony weren't close. Tony was definitely, you know, had his own personality, a really cool dude. But everybody, for a man, even back then when he was 21 years old, was like, that dude can play football.
Yeah, he can spin it. He could spin it.
That dude can play.
Yes, so true.
I liked having Tony because it was the first highlight video that I'd made to like a hip-hop version of Dave Matthews' Crash. You know, I was like, that's kind of fun. Yeah.
All right. So do that same exercise, but now you're talking to a salesman who's going to give a presentation to a big prospect, right? Yeah. Talk through that mind. Hey, the pressure is on to perform. I'm prepared for it, but now I'm walking into this boardroom and I'm about to talk to, 16 members of the C-suite of this company.
Right. So I think any business is about like the value proposition. If I'm gonna take the time and listen to your show, what value does it provide? Like, I think in sports psychology, I found a way, mental conditioning, to have a job because I haven't waited in an office for people to come to me. You know, whether it's making videos, breaking down film, teaching the Wonder Lake. I mean, everything I did, helping coaches with their preparation for their press conferences, speeches, all that stuff. That's how I think I've built more relevance than sitting with somebody one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, it's a matter of, I think in that conversations, only think about one thing at a time. So within this 15 to 20 minutes, what's the intent? Like what's the intent? I want them to understand that Provasic, while similar to other products, is better because it allows you to retain your memory longer. So that's the intent, okay? And then let's break down the way that you're going to establish that value. Take away what you're reading right now, but what establishes that value? Cost, price, health, statistics, numbers. How can we color that? Add story, add context. Like with Coach Saban, we talk a lot about, all right, we're going to talk about, we got these injuries, but then we're going to add a story of Apollo 13 about sticking a square peg in a round hole.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to add that to working with what we have to find an answer to tell the story better than just saying we got injuries,
mm-hmm.
And adding, so you're trying to add some elements to that, having a conversation. Why do you feel prepared? Who are you going to look at? Where are you going to target? We're not going to build emotion off people's facial expressions. And then really, are you balancing up the mediums? The average attention span could be 4 to 6 minutes. Talking, video, overhead, slide, all the different elements that are going to keep the attention in a way, all stuff I learned from teaching, because if I didn't, the dudes in LA would start, fighting me. I think it's a conversation in and around that. And then, lastly, like what does success look like? If ultimately, you made the point, that's all you can do. That's what I love about the military. The military has this thing called commander's intent. So think of the Bin Laden mission. You have the plan, and the plan is, all right, we're going to have these 3 helicopters. We're going to do this. We're going to go from Abbottabad, or we're going to go from Jalalabad, Pakistan. We're going to or Afghanistan to Abbottabad, Pakistan. And we're going to go in and we're going to do this. We're going to get to the top floor. And then we're going to do this. We're going to breach here, here, and here. Okay, that's the plan. What's the intent? Get to the 3rd floor, smoke the dude.
Yeah.
That's the intent. Like, no matter what happens with the plan, you're getting to the top 4 and you're eliminating him. And so that's why there are guys, when the plan failed and the helicopter crashed, the intent didn't change.
Yeah. Right.
And that's, I think, an important mindset even we're dealing with right now, in life, like what do I control? And like for me in with everything going on with life right now, it's just, I try to get factual information from a government website or one of the NBA teams I work with. This is what's going on in LA. This is what you have to do. These are the things that you can control, and then live by the truth. And then not put myself in a situation. If I watch a lot of TV in and around health, going all the way back to when I was 18 years old, I get really scared, and it takes away my bandwidth to have a good conversation like this.
No, I love it. I love it. So I want to ask you, because we're really real and transparent on this, right? We talk about, Darren's future Hall of Famer. He's in the Ring of Honor for the Dallas Cowboys. Like, people look at him and like, oh, his life is easy. He doesn't deal with anything. And we want to make it very clear that there are struggles across the board, no matter who you are. They may look different, and then we struggle with a lot of the same things. Talk us through, you coach this, right? But you also have to practice this yourself. So talk us through a scenario where, hey, this is an account that I really wanted to win, or this is a team I really wanted to get in front of, and you faced adversity. Like, what is the mindset that you're going through? And you've talked about neutral thinking and all that, but really, what does that look like for you, and how do you address that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think across the board, like the idea of being neutral, even if you just related it to health and you got a specific diagnosis in that moment that was true, but a lot of times health is fluid. So you're focused next on the plan you're putting into place and what you can do going forward. You're having the discipline to stay off the internet, trust the people you're talking to. I think in the business world. So, I put all this money into this book. We launched it Super Bowl, February 3rd, February 4th. And then a month later, all this stuff happens. I had like 17 speaking events booked. I'd hired an agent for a lot of money. I lost every speaking event.
Yeah, right.
And so no matter what happens this year, I'm going to be probably net 50% minus. So I've had to readjust my own expectations, then go back into the sports world and find some of the people that I'm close with, starting new programs that are able to get it done, even as they don't know if the season's going to happen. And then with that, and find a way. Okay. Life kind of is like this, I think, Tyler, like, what can I do? Like what can I do right now? All this shit's going on. I'm fucking up in the mountains, blah, blah. Or it's like, what can I do? Right. What can I do? Okay. I can still find a way to make sure I can cover this, this, and this, do my payroll, all these things. I'm not maybe going to hit there. That's okay. And then I got to stay really neutral because, maybe vaccines come, maybe they don't. I don't know. Maybe it's 18 months, maybe it's 8 months, maybe it's 8 days. I want to give tomorrow a chance to have its own history in a life.
Yeah.
I don't want to project my problems with today on tomorrow and already write my story when there's too many new things going on. That's just the reality right now, is things are really, really fluid. I'm glad that for 44 years of my life, I got to live what was normal. I don't know what the next years are going to look like, but I'm optimistic that we'll find a way through, and that business wise, the message that we teach you, Limitless Minds, or myself, still has relevance. Mm-hmm. I want to also make sure I'm around really good people who are equally looking to find creative solutions. And I think for our business, we've found certain things. I think our business, Limitless Minds, is on track to have an incredible year. Awesome. And I think myself personally may be different than I expected, but I modified that. And what I'm really happy is that the book makes sense and it's resonating, because I think neutral thinking, truthfully, is going to probably be the best place we're going to be able to get for a while.
Yes.
Yeah. Tomorrow could be different. And this is what I can do to influence that. What am I doing now? I'm up at a place where I'm controlling my environment to the degree that I can with my niece, and, kind of relaxing. And then I'll get back Sunday night and do everything I got to do next week.
One of the most important things that I learned today is like you have individually, you have to understand you.
Yes.
You have to understand your limitations, your strengths or whatnot, because you can't move forward until you deal with self.
Yeah. And your triggers, Darren.
Exactly.
The things that affect you. Like, I don't mandate like you can't watch the news.
Right.
I know that what the studies say, and I know how it affects me. I can watch politics, but the health stuff really scares me. Even ESPN, when I watch the ticker and it's got, this guy's got sick, this guy's got so I can't watch ESPN right now. At a point, I might get to the point where eventually, because then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, dude, I know that dude. Like, what? And so, but I know they got to do what they got to do to sell. And putting, baseball's got, 3,400 players and, 1.3% test positive, but putting every one of the 1.3% on the bottom, particularly the bigger names, is what's going to sell.
Yeah.
And then I see that, and then I'm like, terrified.
Right.
And so I think for me, my bigger point is, but that might not bother other people. It might not even faze them.
Right.
But so I just think that Darren knowing Darren, Ben knowing Ben, Tyler knowing, then that informs your behavior.
Exactly.
Yep.
I'm not going to watch that right now. Like, I'm going to watch fucking Pretty Women.
Exactly.
But your point. Yeah. Stop looking at Instagram and making your life look at it through the lens of someone else's life, this fake life on Instagram, right? Understanding who you are, what triggers you, like you said, how you operate. And then look, you've got the foundational truths, that you provide. And I want you to start helping our listeners, find you, one, and then resources that you can provide. And then ways maybe that corporations, if C-level executives are listening right now, how to connect with you on Limitless Minds and all that. Like, I want you to do that, but gosh, you gotta stop living through someone else's life. And everything that we're doing right now is we are loathing after what someone else is living, which is not even reality. Right. And just live in the present. And I love the neutral thinking, right? We're not living in the past. We're not living in the future. We're living right now. And we're going to do what we can do and control what we can control right now. Let the rest go. And do what you can do.
Feelings are all over the place.
Yes. Exactly.
Don't judge feelings. Just mandate your next behavior.
That's right.
And I think that's something that's really powerful. And ultimately, people were like, "Oh my God, your dad was a positive thinker," and I was like, I ultimately looked at a car. A car can't be going backwards and then all of a sudden be going forwards.
Right.
And getting to neutral is just like, all right, I've stopped and I can go backwards again if I start doing that stuff, or I can start to go forwards. And it is scary when it comes to health. It is scary when it comes to personal relationships. I mean, and I've mentioned it 3 or 4 times, but like, I start thinking, like, well, how do you meet somebody in 2020? So, right now, how do you do simple better, which is one I got from Dr. Elko, or, which I think came originally from the guy that coached the Cubs, Joe Madden. Do simple better, like wake up, exercise, eat, make sure I'm doing the things that I need to do when I'm out in public. I'm smart. I'm all the different types of things. And that's where fortunately for me, I don't have a political leaning one way or the other. And I'm able to get the data from these teams that just say, if you do A, this will help you with B.
Right? Yeah.
And then if something happens and it goes the wrong way on you, just, stay, trust in yourself, taking your medication, doing what you got to do and riding through it and kind of moving forward. But I just think the last point that I would make is judgment is a killer.
Yes.
I remember hearing Matt McConaughey say, if there's one thing we know about people, they're going to act like people, and I had a quarterback that played in the NFL 4 or 5 years ago who had a really good first couple seasons, but he was really struggling with his head coach. And I remember, CAA had asked me to go out and spend some time with him. And I remember we just sat down, we talked, and he was like, this is how I came in. I was doing this, and this is what our coordinator was like. But, this guy's this, and this, and he's always singling me out. Like, everything he was saying was true. He really wasn't complaining. It was just like this was his reality and how it was affecting him and affecting what he was looking at during the games. And then I listened. And then the next, I was going to come back the next week. And I came back the next week, and I brought the same coach, and I played him from 3 different press conferences, the same coach talking about 7 players exactly the same way he was talking about this quarterback. Wow. The quarterback had no idea that all the things he was saying about him, he was saying about all those other guys.
Right.
And I said, could it be that this dude's just a dick?
Yeah.
Could it be that's what he is? Right. So, and whether he likes you or not, he's not really treating you any different than anybody else. Exactly. So are you going to concede your year to that? Yeah. Accept him for who he is. Yeah. He's not meaning to do it to you. And deep down, he's probably not that way. That's how he communicates with the media. Like, what are you going to do to give yourself a chance to play better in these next 5 games.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
Accept him for who he is. Right now, in certain areas in our politics, in our business, and our other things, we got to accept some things right now. And then we got to influence them however we think we can. And then we sometimes you have to accept the uncomfortability. There are still a lot of things that we control.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not going to spend my whole life thinking about a football game that's not going to have any people at it. I'm going to focus in already having some conversations with NBA people in Orlando that just got there 2 days ago. Now they're quarantining. I was having a conversation with one of our coaches yesterday, and I'd been looking through old video. I was going through the old Just Do It commercials from the 90s. And, Darren, we're a little older than these dudes. But one of the commercials, they were so good. It said, greatness needs a lot of things, but it doesn't need an audience. And I just thought, like, A, how true is that for now?
Oh, man, that's so true.
And like, A, for those guys that aren't going to play in front of one, but I think B, like, while you're in your room, what are you doing? Is it only video games? Is it stretching? Is it a combination? I mean, like, you're away from your family. Those guys, if they go the distance, are going to be away. It'll be 6 weeks before their families can even join them. Mm-hmm. So it's a totally – and then I don't know how you guys are, Ben and Tyler. Like, I'm like on pins and nails watching to see if the NBA can pull this off.
Yeah.
Because it's really – because if they've taken all these precautions and they can't, like, what does that mean?
What impact does that have on the NFL? What does it have on all these other sports?
That's my thought is, like, how if one guy gets it and he's got to be quarantined, well, who did he come in contact with on the team? And then you got half your team's out or your coaches, and I just don't
shut everything.
I mean, I don't want to be a negative thinker. I don't want to be a negative thinker, but I just don't. I don't see how you can make it through a full season.
Well, I think what's good is at least knowing that league. What they're doing is testing the players for the most part every day. So if a guy does test positive, he can quarantine.
Yeah.
He'll need 2 negative tests to get back after 14 days. But because you've been testing all the other guys every day, you don't have to take the whole team out.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a plan in place kind of for that.
Yeah.
But obviously, you still have like, look at that Major League Baseball. All those players are going home every day. The NBA is going back to a controlled environment. What are the people at your house? What have they done? So, I think there's a lot that's going to be interesting and how you manage it kind of going forward. Obviously, it's an age that if they have this challenge, they move through pretty quickly.
Sure.
To the degree that you can control the spread. I listened to my niece's college orientation yesterday for Point Loma. It was crazy. Like, I mean, just it's a virtual orientation, and just all the things that they're doing on that campus to try to keep people safe. 4,000 students.
Right.
Yeah.
You also think about the football season, like if Pat Mahomes gets it, or there's such an asterisk next to. I just think there's going to be such an asterisk next to the season because you can't help who gets it and how long they're out. And it's just, I don't know. It's just a fascinating.
Yeah. And I mean, there's so many levels, and we could talk for another hour and a half.
No, I agree. I agree about that. So, but anyways,
it's insane the impact that it could have on our country. I mean, even just look at it economically, right? Yeah. Like, look at the impact if you don't have an NFL season. Like, that $20 billion number is big. Okay, now let's talk about collegiate football, right? That number is even bigger, right? So, like, it's just an insane impact that this could have. And I mean, I'm not smart enough to figure it out. I just hope that there are people out there smart enough to figure it out and bold enough.
I hope so too. I'm praying for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right. So I want you to talk about your book, how people can find it, what the name of it is. And then I want to talk about Limitless Minds, and then any projects that you are accessible to, certain audiences that can take advantage of your skills and teachings.
Yeah. The book is called It Takes What It Takes. How to gain control of your life and think neutrally. It's anywhere, it's on HarperCollins. It's on Amazon. It's on Barnes & Noble. Any place that you could go get a book. Mm-hmm. On the 19th of this month, it's about $21. But on the 19th of this month, we're actually going to have the ebook on Kindle or Audible will be $4. So you could buy it on the 19th of the month. It's done, truthfully, it's done really, really well, which has been incredible. Particularly, my biggest concerns was not a lot of people knew who I was. Russell Wilson wrote the foreword. He also reads the foreword, 12 chapters. And I think if you listen to it, it's about 3 hours and 20 minutes, really easy. And the book is kind of like a textbook, and this not a textbook in how it reads, because it's a lot of stories and examples in sports and out of sports, but just a really basic guideline. You don't need a lot of pre-education to read this book. Yeah. And I think what's the unique value proposition is I think we did a really good job of establishing the negative of negativity. And then I think we also established the idea that neutral thinking is a legitimate third way to look at that psychological paradigm. Social media, I'm pretty new to it, but Instagram, I'm at Trevor Moawad. We try to, post.
Spell your last name so people can find it. Just a little.
Yeah, it's a common name in Beirut, Lebanon, but which people always find crazy to know that
you're a blonde-haired, blue eyes guy.
I know I'm a blue-eyed guy that's the majority Lebanese more than anything else. But TREVORMOAWAD, and that's same for Twitter, LinkedIn, some of the other mediums as well. And then Limitless Minds is thinkbig-gofar.com. Just look up Limitless Minds. Russell Wilson is one of the co-founders and chairman. I'm the CEO. We have two other partners, Harrison Wilson and DJ Eitzen. I really like the business, Tyler. I think it's, knowing this world, because my dad was in this world, I think it's innovative. I think it's on time. I think the message is good. I think there are a lot of good business options people can obviously get, but I like what we're doing. I like our fluidity and our ability to adjust. And so we're still green and growing, that's for sure. But yeah, that's Limitless Minds. We have content on our website. You can download 10 podcasts that we did the last couple of months with people like Corey Close, women's basketball coach at UCLA, Mel Tucker from Michigan State, Frank Caliendo, but all, just all sorts of different things.
Which Christine means that Moawad, John Madden, John Gruden, we're all on. But Lex Gillette, the great long jumper who was blind, who I met through Michael Johnson, who has an incredible story about having 14 surgeries at 8 years old and going blind, and being able to jump a ridiculous amount. So and we got some really cool content you can get as well. But I like the book just as a starting point. I just think it's easy. I think a 14-year-old can read it just as much as a 65-year-old. I always ask, and you guys get this, people are like, well, you're a sports guy. How does it relate? Man, fucking sports is the ultimate business.
It is.
28% of our guys in your league are making it to a fourth year, let alone a fifth or sixth year. The guys that have Darren's career, they don't happen. And you're publicly traded in front of the world, every Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, or Thursday. Yeah. And so it's the ultimate business. And almost 35% of our coaches in pro sports are getting canned every year. It's a tough job. So I'm proud to come from the sports world, but I think it all relates.
It does relate, man. Absolutely. And it takes what it takes is a book that we're going to actually promote, man, and get out there. I'm going to get on it myself because, listen, there's so many tools that are out there, resources that are out there that we've never a guy who's been in the sports world forever. We haven't even scratched the surface, man. Yeah. What you're bringing to the table, man, is awesome. Yeah, what you've done with Russell is just phenomenal. And it shows every day. Every time Russell gets in front of the camera, man, you see the positive. You see that ability to overcome. So, man, we really appreciate you there. You have one more question. Let's end it with one question.
Yeah. Yeah. So they say no idea is original. I actually stole this question You were actually on a podcast that I stole this question. Drama.
Okay.
Young and Reckless. So the question is, you can look back, you can go back to any time in your life and tell yourself one thing. Where do you go and what do you tell yourself?
You know, I go back to 2008 when I got the opportunity to take a big job from overseeing 5 people to 80 people and became the director of performance at IMG Academy. I would go back and tell myself to really think through how I can not only be an excellent business leader, but how through these changes I could be a better husband. I go back and am so disappointed, not because I did something wrong per se. I just didn't do enough things right. It's really disappointing for me because I think everything that could have allowed that to continue was within my control, and I didn't do it. And so I just wish I would have thought more about it and not thought making money or whatever was enough. I just, connection with people is a really big deal. You got to work on it. And when you're busy, you can still be a good father, a good mother, and you can still be a really good husband or spouse. I made my priorities success at work, and I regret that.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Again, transparency, man. We really appreciate you sharing that. And again, Moawad Consulting Group is another website, moawadconsultinggroup.com.
TrevorMoawad.com. Yeah, we bought them all.
Yeah, get it. But thank you so much for your time. Keep impacting those teams, individuals, companies, because really I wish our entire country and globe could have the perspective that you just shared with us.
And we're going to continue to push your message, man.
Anytime you need even a situational thing, let's stay connected. Please make sure you get my cell phone from John. Still might be in some of the girls' bathrooms in McKinney. just in case it's not. Let's make sure we stay connected. But particularly for you guys right now in Texas, man, wishing everybody to stay safe out there. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Trevor. Appreciate you.
Right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, bro.
Awesome. That was awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, go. Now you gotta go.
Got a tinkle.
Dude, I had to go in the middle. I was like, where does this dude go? I was not going to make it. I was like,